when I went into my own alcoholism, I started to understand and depersonalise a lot of the stuff that I kind of blamed her for. Because when I was an alcoholic, I was really selfish and I didn't think about people and I didn't phone people to see how they were getting on. So when she fucked off and left us, I hated her for that, you know what I mean?
Right.
But in my kind of older years, I'm a bit less angry about that stuff.
Right.
And I think, you know, a lot of us, men and myself included, you know, we carry that misogynistic gene where we grow up in a culture where it's sort of part of it's ingrained in us, and then we unlearn it or we learn to sort of notice it.
Aye.
And that's fine. But the thing with Tate is it's a power fantasy. He claims to be red pilling people. What's he red pilling them against? Because the dominant ideology of our world is capitalism, and he is the physical, psychological embodiment of that.
Aye.
It's male dominance underscored by the threat of violence. Do it his way. Every other way won't work. You can't imagine life any other way. I'm not one of these lefties that's like, every Tory's evil, every billionaire should die, and everybody who's made a lot of money off of some idea that they've had is actually really an idiot.
Aye.
Like, Donald Trump can't be an idiot. You can't accidentally become the most powerful man in the world twice, right?
No.
He's not an idiot, right? He's of his
Far
time.
from it.
If people really sit down and analyse where they're at in terms of their politics and really sort of reverse engineer it, they're going to find at an earlier point that they started off at a much more moderate political position on things, where they had a mixture of left and right
Aye,
beliefs
definitely.
like the average person does, right? And then through a process of being completely bombarded on social media with this idea, because there's evidence that some people motivated by an extreme interpretation of a religion have behaved in a certain way, once you start going down the idea of that all Muslims must be like that, you know, you lose me then.
So welcome to Social Sessions. Today we're joined with the wonderful Darren McGarvey. How you doing, Dan?
I'm good, my man. How are you?
Brilliant, man. It's great to have you on.
Mate, I was just looking at my watch there because Paul was like, 2:20, but then I was like, oh no, but there's an hour and it's changed. and then I realised actually it's 2:20.
That's pretty well forward at the end. So I'll just kind of quickly like take you back to your childhood, just run over that, Dan, quickly. How was that like? Obviously, I know it was at Pollock. You kind of was
Yep.
it? Aye. So what was that like growing up?
A schema in the 90s, mate, do you know what I mean? Just the usual sort of stuff. It was all pretty run down. And there was a lot of like lack of opportunities for people, but also a kind of mindset as well among people, that there's no really much hope.
Aye.
But one of the many things that was interesting about Pollock was also there was a lot of activism around the poll tax or water charges or the closures of community centres. We had a lot of people in Pollock that were very active in terms of resisting all that stuff.
Aye.
So it kind of, for me, that I guess was part of my own development, was being around that, you know, because some people in my family were involved in that quite heavily.
Aye.
So it was always you always had your kind of watching over your shoulder when you
Aye.
walk about, even just going to the shops. And I wasn't one of the boys that was out like scrapping all the time
Aye.
or looking for that kind of energy, you know
Aye.
what I mean? But it was definitely like it was a boot camp, you know, and how to navigate people.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the skills I learned as a child and a teenager operating in those environments with highly unpredictable people at home and in the community mean that I'm very attuned to people around me wherever I am, and can navigate things relatively calmly that other people might find nerve-wracking, like being around people that have got a prestigious reputation or being around people that other people would be frightened to be around, you know, because as long as I can kind of feel that it's safe, I'm good.
I know. I'm kind of similar, Dan, in that aspect. Like I can kind of navigate like both, like maybe talk to like KCs and stuff, and then the next thing you're talking to somebody that's maybe been involved in crime and that. But I know you had a kind of like obviously kind of similar to a lot of people. You had a kind of traumatic upbringing.
Yeah.
How did that kind of shape you then? Like, because obviously I know you kind of speak a lot about that.
I do, but it's because I'm asked about it a lot. Do you know what I mean?
Aye.
So it's just one of the things. I mean, when you grow up in a home where somebody who's got a drink problem, then it just means every day is sort of unpredictable, really.
Aye.
That's partly why I seek that predictability, and sometimes it can be quite overbearing, maybe for people around me. What my needs are
Mhm.
in terms of, I'm sort of person like I need to know how long something's going to last.
Aye.
So when I came in the day, I was like,
Aye.
here's how long I've got. This is when
Aye.
I need to go, and that's to give me a sense of security. Do you know
Aye.
what I mean? Because if once you go 1, 2, 3 minutes past that, I start to get anxious and
Aye.
restless, and that could be the same whether I'm at a party, whether I've got a gig. I don't leave my house unless I've got an exit strategy. Do you know what I mean?
Aye.
For when I get back to the house, and that all comes from childhood. It comes from that sort of that feeling of a lack of safety and a lack of control. And my whole childhood wasn't like that. My dad's
Aye.
pretty solid. He worked when I was a kid. But there was a lot of stuff going on when he was at the house that maybe he didn't really understand until later. When the bottles start turning up, the empties or hiding around the house and all that sort of stuff. So my mum, she was just it's Mother's Day actually, that's right. She was just she had a tough life like a lot of kids back then. Growing up, Castlemilk, the Gorbals. I think her parents were drinkers as well.
Aye.
And so you can see that there's generational echoes of things that come down successive years of the family. And her thing was, before she had really got her head around what her level of trauma was, what her level of needs were, what she would need to do to make herself feel safe and secure, she fell pregnant. You know what I mean?
Aye.
And part of the thing that predicts that she would fall pregnant is the level of trauma she experienced
Aye.
and the socioeconomic background she come from. So in many ways, like, although no one will ever know about my mother apart from the fact that I talk about her, and she doesn't even have a gravestone. Do you know what I mean?
Aye.
She's like like a mad spectre that just existed and then she was just gone. Do you know what I mean? But the thing that the only thing really I've learned from her is when I went into my own alcoholism, I started to understand and depersonalize a lot of the stuff that I kind of blamed her for. Because when I was an alcoholic, I was really selfish and I didn't think
No.
about people and I didn't phone people to see how they were getting on. So when she fucked off and left us, I hated her for that. You know what I mean?
Aye.
But in my kind of older years, I'm a bit less angry about that stuff.
Aye. Which I think, honestly, I think that's like, I think it's a kind of skill that you kind of evolve with when that kind of stuff happens to you, and trying to trying to take yourself personally away from the situation and look at it from maybe a bird's eye view and
Mm.
take in everything is hard because a lot of us are triggered by things. Do you know what I mean? And we'll obviously talk about that when we're talking about your book and stuff. But I know you've got your new book. Is it the Trauma Industrial Complex?
It'll be out in August, so I'm just kind of like trailing it now, just letting
Aye.
people know it's coming. And it'll be out the sort of end of July, start of August, with a companion live show at the Fringe that'll probably tour depending on how the book performs. But basically the book using my experience of talking about trauma publicly as a kind of case study to caution people
Hmm.
because we have more access to public platforms than ever before, and these platforms, apart from obviously being a good means of communication and information sharing and all of the positives that come with that sort of stuff, the negative side of it is that for those of us who are highly impulsive and lack boundaries
Hmm.
with ourselves and other people, these can become quite fertile ground for us to overshare,
Hmm.
based on this fallacy that talking about what happened to us or an interpretation of
Aye.
what happened to us is part of the healing journey. And it is obviously part of the healing journey, but usually it's it's a bit safer to disclose information in a sort of enclosed space when you're just trying to get your head around what is it that happened, how has it affected me, and that conversation often has to at some point become a two-way
Hmm.
conversation where somebody can feed back to you and challenge you sometimes.
Aye.
Not necessarily that your interpretation is wrong, but there's a lot of meaning that we make of our experiences that's more about us having a sense of predictability or continuity in the story of our lives. And that meaning, that sense making journey, sometimes kind of runs contrary to what's true or
Hmm.
what's useful. And in order to really understand our experiences, before we've disclosed them on a public platform, we need to sit down with somebody, a closed mouth friend, somebody who has insight,
Hmm.
and discuss them. And what happens is the people who are often the most traumatized, who don't know they're traumatized, their impulsivity, the lack of boundaries and the sense of validation that's promised when you talk about stuff publicly. This is what draws them into that space, to vomit up trauma publicly, commodify it accidentally. And then once they realise that they are visible in some way, and it could just be in their scheme, or it could be a global audience, if they're not healed, they'll get triggered in that vulnerability, and they'll start to think, oh, this is the only thing about me that matters, so I must continue to talk about it. Whereas you can tell with me, I'm happy not to talk about it. So my book's really sort of, it's urging caution. And it's not just for people with trauma. It's for content creators. It's for therapists. It's for anybody who sells this idea or buys into this idea that trauma is the story of what happened to you, and that's not what trauma is.
No, I agree with that. It's a buzzword now, and I think it's getting overused. I think it's not getting used in the right areas. Like, obviously, I spent a long time in prison, right? But I speak to some guys, and I'll say, like, when you went into prison, did you ever get screened for trauma? Like, no. There's actually no trauma work that gets done in prisons. I think that's really, I just don't understand it. But I know, I mean, it's not easy to get people, and it's a lot of money to get decent people that are going to actually be able to treat it. But it's interesting you say that, because I've had guys on the podcast before, and as soon as they forget the cameras are there, and they open up a bit, and then they'll go out, and they'll say to me, Sean, go to take that out. Like, I spoke too much there. Like, and I'm always like more than happy. Like, I'll say to Paul, can you take it out? But it happens often. Like, or then you'll get a guy who's maybe went on a podcast, spoke about everything, thinks he's a wee bit of a celebrity for a while in there, and then that runs out, and then they'll maybe fall. I've seen that as well, relapse. Do you know what I mean? And because they're not getting validated anymore, isn't it? So no, it's a really interesting point. Really interesting point.
And it's, you're right to point out that the word gets overused, but that's the same with any medical terminology that goes from behind a kind of gate, a gate that's professionally guarded by clinical experts, and then begins to become part of our common use. And this has been the same for any words that involve kind of like mental health, or bullying or things like that. People will say, oh, I'm getting bullied, and I'll think back to what, people talk about getting bullied online. And I'll be thinking, well, that's the sort of bullying you can actually walk away from. Do you know what I mean?
Aye.
Because just stop looking at it. Do you know what I mean? I remember the bullying was like, it was right there. You're navigating. You could be walking down a school corridor, and your feet just get kicked away behind you, and you're just like, part of you wants to just fight back, but part of you knows even if you got the better of that one person, everybody else is going to think, no, he thinks he's a ticket now. That boy that normally doesn't fight back, now fighting back, so somebody else wants to fight you, and it just never ends. But these things, these words, when they become more common, and in a way, it's a kind of, you've got to look at the pros and the cons of it. My fear is not that people are announcing that they're traumatized when they aren't, right, and that it doesn't apply to them. It's that the people who are traumatized don't pick up the language to describe their experience, whose trauma's never been witnessed, and that's a much bigger fear. And that's why in the book I talk about that. I put that to experts in the book, and one of the brilliant points that was made to me was, if trauma's been democratized, that's a good thing. And you're going to get a lot of grifters, and you're going to get a lot of kind of overuse and misapplied terminology. But the history of trauma shows that at every stage, people tried to minimize and dismiss it. So workers were dismissed for saying, these conditions are dangerous, building the London Underground and all that. You know what I mean? They've got mad things dripping down on their faces and all that. Children, corporal punishment, getting leathered in school. No, back then people saying, no, this is fair level of punishment, and other people are saying, no, these kids are traumatized. That's the generation we come from. That's our grandparents and our parents. 20th century, war at home and war in the households here. Do you know what I mean? Just angry, violent men, or emotionally unstable men, and there's just so much trauma around. So I think it's on balance, probably positive.
I think I bang on that, and if I'm talking about trauma, I'll always my go-to guy is Gabor Mate. I think Gabor Mate's probably the best person I've ever seen describe trauma and talk about it. But the way, like, I think you're right. There's so many people out there trauma informed. What does that mean? Like, I mean, like, people say that a prison's trauma informed, but in my eyes, a prison's re-traumatizing you every day.
Yeah.
So how can it be a
A
trauma-informed?
prison in the UK, definitely,
Aye.
or the United States.
Aye.
Um,
If you look at Scandinavia, and that's different because they probably they have that kind of
well,
trauma.
they apply the
Aye, of
evidence
course,
to their
of course.
criminal
Aye.
justice system, so they're trying to get the balance between the kind of three main the three main components. You know, so you've got retribution. The victims need to feel compensated. And then you've got the kind of rehabilitation side of it, which is most people can be rehabilitated if the right amount of work is put in. And then the third one is you need to make a gesture towards the general population. This is behaviour that's not tolerated.
Aye.
So you're always trying to balance them up when a judge is sitting deciding within the context of the law that they're presented with what somebody should be getting. We all sit at home and we go, how's somebody getting something for that? And then this person's getting something for
Aye.
that, because we're operating off moral intuition. But if a legal system was set up according to moral intuition, it would be even more confusing and fucked and hypocritical
No, I
than,
get you, aye.
than the one
Aye.
that we've got the new. So every case is taken on its own merits with its own aggravating and mitigating factors. But one thing about our criminal justice system is that no matter the crime, no matter the retribution, and no matter the sort of example that's made, the person goes into the prison, there's very little in terms of rehabilitation on offer.
Aye.
So that's why we see more people going back into prison, and that's why people lose faith in the criminal justice system. But unfortunately in the UK, what we have is no one wants to have a conversation about trauma and the role that it plays. A lot of the boys who end up in the prison, they were victims of the crimes that they went on to perpetrate. And that might show us something in terms of what we could do to prevent that cycle beginning. I was working one day in Edinburgh, and there was a son. I was working with this guy who was in a class, and then he was talking about how his dad was in the same halls as him, just
Aye,
a few
fair.
a few
I've seen that a
cells
few
down,
times.
and that was the quality time that he was getting with his dad.
Aye.
They were both in there long term. Do you know what I mean? And you know, the conversation that the country needs to have is not the one that it wants to have. It wants to have a conversation about building more jails, making the jails more hardcore than they are. It's people actually with the strongest opinions on this. They live in communities where they're under policed and the levels of crime are low,
Definitely.
and everyone's got a bought house and 2 driveways, and they feel very strongly about a lot of things that don't really affect them. And so sometimes the opinions are they're the strongest opinions, the most influential, but they actually they don't hold up to the evidence. No, in my opinion.
No, and listen, I totally agree. We speak quite a lot about that actually on here on this podcast, and I think Twitter. I mean, obviously Twitter's turned into a bit of a cesspit, Dan. I think you know that yourself, but like
It's
when you've
hardcore,
got
man.
like powerhouses on there, like Andrew Tate, right, for example, right. I mean, I really dislike that guy, and I think and you obviously need to watch what you're saying, but I don't know, but he's obviously been alleged to crimes, but
A load of women saying he done the same thing to them all, and they don't know each
I
other.
know it's always the same thing, and it's like I could genuinely say, like, see every ex-girlfriend I've had, I've still got a good relationship with them to this day. Like, if you see them, hi, how you doing? These people seem to be very bad at choosing girlfriends, or like they are what the girl said. You know
the
what I
thing
mean?
with
Like,
Tate, he sort of sells himself as an alpha male,
aye,
but I find it hard to see how he could be an alpha male, because one, he's so desperate to be seen.
aye,
I mean, I say that with a level of self-awareness. We're sitting here on a podcast that's being
no, I know,
filmed, right?
aye.
But like me, with Tate, he's very sensitive. He's very sensitive. I mean, he the whole rigmarole he's in the now was because he couldn't stop himself from replying to a young lassie who said something about him on social media,
I know,
Greta Thunberg.
aye,
And he just had to get in and be mean and horrible and belittle her in the way that's his classic style, which again is not very alpha.
no,
You know, that's very look at me, I'm strong, please believe I'm strong. I need you to think that I'm powerful and dominant, because something inside me is broken and I don't know how to look at it. And people who think that's an alpha male, that's the thing that they're carrying as well. Now, it could be men and women. I know that it's framed a lot of the time in terms of misogyny, and it should be. And I think, you know, a lot of us, men and myself included, you know, we carry that misogynistic gene where we grow up in a culture where it's sort of part of it's ingrained in us, and then we unlearn it or we learn to sort of notice it.
Aye.
And that's fine. But the thing with Tate is it's a power fantasy. He claims to be red pilling people. What's he red pilling them against? Because the dominant ideology of our world is capitalism, and he is the physical, psychological embodiment of that.
Aye.
It's male dominance underscored by the threat of violence. Do it his way. Every other way won't work. You can't imagine life any other way. The people who are drawn to him, they're struggling economically.
I know.
They can't navigate relationships. They don't know how to be happy in relationships. They're not even well enough to attract a safe, secure partner. And so he offers them this kind of fantasy, this simulacrum of self-help, which is really just about worshipping him. You know, and I don't think you can't, and to be fair,
he's very articulate, but
well, see, the thing is, these days you just need to be able to string a sentence together and people think you're a genius. Do you know what I mean? And that's just because men, as a result of buying into the idea that they can't express feelings, have boxed themselves into vocabularies of about 500 words by choice.
Aye.
And people think they're stupid and people think they're inarticulate when actually they're just scared to say, oh, you have beautiful hair.
Aye.
Rather say, oh, I'd fucking pump her.
Aye.
Do you know what I mean?
No, definitely.
And so what if you watch Tate, right? The way he talks to his brother, the way he talks about his girlfriends, the way he talks about other human beings. This is a man who either has no empathy, very little empathy, or a man who's cynical enough to act like he has no empathy or little empathy because he thinks it'll sell. Either way, this isn't good news for people who are deeply invested in this guy's worldview.
No.
If you gave him a magic wand and let him create the world that he envisions, it would be a horrible world for the people who love him. Trust me.
Oh, well, do you know what the thing is? Like, I listen to him and it annoys me because I was going to go on to say it's like people him that are talking about this hard-on punishment. You need to, if you caught with a knife, give them 25 years, and you're like I've seen some of the things he said, and you're like, where are you coming? Like, were you ever working class? I don't believe, or I don't know, Dan, I could be wrong, but I sometimes think it could be a paid kind of controlled opposition where he's kind of trying to. So many young men are attracted to it, and I get it. Like and I think it's exactly what you say. It's the broken part inside them that attracts
human beings like the strong man,
Aye,
right? In times of uncertainty, and they like the idea of someone who has all the answers, right? Now that's one of the reasons politicians are suffering just now. And I don't mean suffering as in their lives are hard or anything like that. I mean the distrust in politics. Because the world we live in, while there are some simple answers to some things are complicated, and politicians get torn between the temptation to sell a simple vision and try and talk honestly about what the complicated things are. People don't have the patience or the time to sit with that. So they want somebody who can break things down into, 12 simple rules or 12 steps, and we gravitate towards that. I'm not saying that every single thing that Andrew Tate has ever said or any of these kind of popular figures online have ever said is not true.
I know.
I'm saying that just because there are kernels of truth to some of the things someone says, it doesn't mean you need to swallow their entire worldview and what they're selling you. Because at the end of the day, this guy's an unashamed businessman who is in it for himself.
Aye.
And, you're just having something, every time you engage with that uncritically, something's being extracted from you that you're not aware of while you think that you're receiving something. I personally, I think a lot of the men who see Andrew Tate as a kind of influential figure of our time, these are men who would not feel safe in his presence.
No.
They wouldn't feel safe to be around him. They would be the men that would be falling in line, not behind because he's alpha, but because he's unpredictable, because he's got this kind of air of a bully.
Aye.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just...
Did you ever see the clip of him, Dan, when he was on like that reality show and he got rejected when he was like younger? You should look at it up, right? It's like it was only like a reality show, and this lassie basically said, "You're, you're a piece of shit," and I'm going with this guy, and his face and everything. I think that moment changed him. I genuinely believe, like at that time, you can see it. He's like heartbroken, like this cat, and he doesn't know what to say. He's getting no answers. He's obviously a lot younger, but I think that just, I think, shaped the way that he speaks now. Do you know what I mean?
Well, this
It's
is why he
like,
wants to control women.
definitely.
And women who gravitate to him, they buy into the fantasy of the safety and security that he could provide them because he's this big, strong man.
Definitely.
I saw a clip. Obviously, you see clips of him. Do you know, you fall asleep watching a space documentary, you wake up to Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson. Do you know what I mean? It's the algorithm. It wants you to it's like, this is what everybody's watching on the fly. Do you know what I mean? It's just him talking about what would he do if his girlfriend broke up with him or he had a broken heart. And he's like, what, you think I'm just going to sit around and be hurt? No, I'm going to go out and work. I'm going to go out and make money. And she is going to be, and basically describing the situation, the sort of power play that would happen if she dared to assert herself. Now, the thing is, he wasn't talking about a hypothetical girlfriend. He's talking about his actual girlfriend. So he's talking to a camera and basically making sure that he's describing for her benefit. Here's what happens if you ever defy me. You will be destroyed. And you will watch me succeed and you will be destroyed and you'll regret it. And it's just like, and there's guys sitting in their house and they're like that.
I know. It's horrible, man.
Do you know? And they're all looking for jobs. They're all looking for jobs. They're all fucked. And I don't mean this. I don't mean, I'm not mocking people who are struggling. But, you know, actually red pill yourself. The red pills that they're offering you, they're not the real red pills, right? Like, what's going on in the world's a lot simpler than people like Andrew Tate want to make out, and he's part of the 1% that's fucking robbing you blind.
No, definitely. And I think if you look at the whole, I was actually going to speak to you about this, like the whole global kind of political sphere, if you want to call it, like Elon Musk. I think he's damaged probably like for his. I was actually talking to Paul about it yesterday, and he was telling me some of the things that happened to him as a child. Like his father was laughing at him and all that for getting bullied and stuff like that. Donald Trump was traumatized. Putin traumatized. You're looking at a bunch of leaders here that are all kind of running through trauma, and this is, I think, why people are identifying it, because they're being half truthful, Dan. See that way on the public, and people go, that's me. But you're like, it's no you. He's worth fucking 357 billion
They
pounds.
see the world differently.
And you're like, and you're like, this guy could literally, like, if he wanted to clear up poverty here, do you know what I mean?
With Elon Musk and all that, I mean, I'm not one of these lefties that's like, every Tory's evil, every billionaire should die, and everybody who's made a lot of money off of some idea that they've had is actually really an idiot. Like, Donald Trump can't be an idiot. You can't accidentally become the most powerful man in the world twice, right? He's not an idiot, right? He's of his time. He's of his time, right? The point with people like this, though, is one of the privileges that you enjoy when you're that wealthy and powerful is that people around you don't feel as comfortable to correct you because they sense intuitively that you're the chief of the tribe, right? So what it means is there's this paradox where a person begins to feel that they're getting more intelligent and more grasp of what's going on while simultaneously becoming less informed and more stupid. Musk, Trump, Putin, anybody in the public eye, we're all expected now, and I'm saying we as in even people like us who are podcasting, we come on podcasts and we talk in generalist terms about general things. When really we're only qualified to talk about one or two things.
Of course.
Right? Now imagine the vanity when you have that many eyes on you and you're being asked questions that really have nothing to do with your level of experience. Musk is a businessman. He acquires businesses. He has a nose for making interventions in the business world. That's what he does. That's what he's good at, right? He's not a fucking engineer. He's not like Tesla. Literally Tesla. Right? He's not that kind of guy. That's part of his branding. He's not like Tony Stark, right? And so he just, through a process of being so famous and getting gassed up and people blowing so much smoke up his fucking hoop for years, he thinks that he's smart enough to go into the government and start cutting government spending based on his understanding of business. But the rules that he's applying to that are rules that can't be safely applied to human safety and security and well-being, because there are some things that a business mindset is not applicable to.
Aye.
And so, you know, it's all fun and games to know while they've got control of their agenda, but the wheels will start falling off it, and what we're going to find underneath it is that a lot of these guys are deeply incompetent, deeply insecure, deeply vulnerable,
Aye.
but they have so much power that they can disguise that, and the damage that they can do operating from that woundedness, and people feeling attracted to that because it's mirroring them. This is how societies take mad turns towards the dark side. Do you know what I mean? Like,
No, do you know, like, you look at it, and I'm very confused in it with like left and right wing and all that, right? It doesn't mean what, like what you were saying, maybe like when Tommy Sheridan and that were all like left wing, or even Maggie Thatcher's right wing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I always say, like a bird flies in unison, but it can only fly if the right and the left fly together. That's the way the world is. People think differently, opinions are different, everything's different. You need healthy debate, and I think we've lost that art of healthy debate. You say something new and you're both far left, you say something far right, and you're like, no, well, I can pick bits of that. I'm not saying that people that are successful shouldn't have money and shouldn't be, if you work hard, you shouldn't be allowed money, but you shouldn't be allowed to accumulate £357 billion. You shouldn't be allowed to accumulate more than like the most GDPs most countries in the world.
yeah.
I think there should be, I've spoken about it before, I don't know what your take on this would be, but I know there would be a lot of things you'd need to watch, but in terms of a maximum wage, where like you maybe made £100 million and that was it. Like, if you kind of live off £100 million, and then the rest goes into building up society, because we've left the working class now, and I think that this is what, I don't know if you agree with this, Dan, but so many working class people don't believe they're working class now. They think they're middle class when they're only one wage away from actually being on benefits.
Yeah.
And it's a very clever trick that they've done, and it's divided the working class even more. And the tactics to divide the working class, because let's be honest, they just would never want the working class coming together, because we've got the power. We just down tools for the day. They better know what to do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, what's your take on that?
Well, the obviously the problem with hitting wealth is another country will just make it easier for wealth to go there. And so in a look after yourself first, the nation state is the most important concern, which is the kind of world we're entering back into now. Then the minute that one country clamps down on billionaires or power or whatever way you want to look at it, another country just opens its doors and says, why don't you just come here and do business here? This is attractive to you. And that, of course, was part of the reason, not all the reason, that I think that while something like the European Union had issues, it wasn't always the most democratic. It became this kind of test bed for ultra neoliberal capitalism. But at the same time, the European Union was one of the first markets to start going, right, Google, come here. We're hitting you with £1 billion fine. Because what you're doing is monopolising the marketplace. Coca-Cola, come here. You need to start telling people how much sugar's actually in these drinks, because we're spending hundreds of millions on dentist treatment or the EU and blah, blah. And so it just shows you the strength of a union, really. But because, you know, we in the UK, we've came out of that. We want to go cap in hand to Jeff Bezos and say, please build an Amazon fulfillment centre the size of Falkirk, and you know, monitor how long people urinate for on their breaks, because we have ran out of ideas about what this country should be like, and we're just trying to stay afloat. So I think that the Gary Stevenson just now, who's kind of flying high in terms of, he's been bubbling away on YouTube for years. I've been watching him for years, but he's having a big moment just now. His message is cutting through. The Daily Mail hacks are all terrified. They're all trying to find some dirt on him to discredit him. And, you know, that just shows the power of his message. But ultimately, his message is quite mainstream. You know, tax the wealthy is quite a mainstream idea.
Of course,
and you know it's mainstream because when you say it, everybody knows what you mean. For a lot of lefties, that won't be good enough for him. for
I
them.
know.
And obviously people on the right just despise the idea anyway. So it's difficult to see where you get an opening
Hmm.
to even have a conversation about what we should do other than continue down the path that we're going down. I'm personally quite worried, you know?
No, listen, I'm worried as well, and I think that the more, because obviously we've got you can't like this the military industrial complex. You've got the big pharma and that. They're never going to give up the power they've got. It's near impossible now to get, like, when you've got the big conglomerates, BlackRock, all this kind of stuff. It's near impossible to break these things now. Do you know what I mean? So are we going to just need to let it play out? Because obviously it's got an end date where the money is all going to go to the one place. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
eventually, is that like is that where we're going? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm similar to you. I can't see where are we going to bring in back? Like, okay, bring in a good welfare system. People go, no, people don't benefit too much, and you're like, listen. Kevin Bridges said a joke about it, right? But I actually believe it. See, like, in it, like, everybody that's on benefits, the money goes straight back into the economy. None of them are holding it. Do you know what I mean? It's the people that are holding billions of pounds that's causing inflation and
Yeah.
and they're able to pull the markets and do whatever they like.
The issue with the benefits thing is that it's public utility, it's a public infrastructure. That's the issue with it. That's the ideological bone of contention.
Mhm,
Is that it can't be opened up to market interference.
mhm,
Now they've came as close as they can to basing it on a model that's based on an American insurance provider. That's why claims are routinely dismissed or said to be ineligible, because that's the tactic that, you know, your kind of Unum insurance in
mhm.
America, a big health insurance provider that got found to be deeply corrupt. They were consulting on the welfare reforms over here way back in the major years. This is a story that's no articulated or
Mhm.
told.
I don't know,
The
Dan.
journey of
Mhm,
welfare reform is a journey that's already been set,
mhm.
right? What politicians disagree about, Tory, Labour, is at what pace do they implement them,
Mhm.
right? So Labour just now sees an opportunity to reinitiate that process, and its argument was the Tories weren't going to do anything about it because it's politically difficult, right? But actually, what that shows is that the Tories thought this shit is so harsh, we will not get away with it at this point in our term because we've
Aye,
been in for so long.
aye,
We've already done austerity 1.1.
aye.
Now they're going to do austerity 2.0. But basically, it involves changing the definitions of certain words so that people who are previously regarded as disabled are not seen
Mhm.
as disabled. It involves a harsher compliance regime, which means that you just get told to come in. You've got to sit and justify why it is that you're on benefits. And it also involves the removal of medical opinion. So it means that a doctor no longer gets oversight over what is deemed to be sick or what is deemed to be healthy.
Alright,
It
aye.
means that it gets outsourced to private companies or other public sector
Mhm.
institutions or whatever, and they're the ones who make the decisions. And you know, all of this, you know, might clamp down on
Mhm.
some of the fraud in the system,
Mhm.
of course, but the collateral
Oh,
damage that
fuck,
comes with
aye.
it, and doing this through the DWP. I mean, this is an organisation that if it was a person, it would be charged with manslaughter. Do you know what I
Aye,
mean? It would be charged with manslaughter. It would be committed to a mental health
aye,
institution for life,
aye.
and it would be declared fit to work, or declare itself fit to work on its own deathbed. It
No,
like
I
this
know.
is one of the most dysfunctional institutions in our country, and the idea that they're the ones who are going to implement this, or the idea that they're going to get to scan your bank accounts and
Aye.
that they're going to get to enter your premises if you're suspected is to be up to anything dodgy, and you're just thinking the only reason they're doing this is because these people can't fight back. The
True.
reason they're not hitting the wealthy people is because the wealthy people can just
I know,
leave
I know, aye,
or
mhm.
fight
Fight
back.
back, aye.
So at least just tell us the truth. You know, just tell us the truth if you're going to do that, because that's what it's really about. But what I find disgusting is the people cheering on.
No, I can't see. Do you know? It's soul destroying to me, right? And I mean it like I can't. It's like to the I cannot understand any working class person that wants to that goes with Elon Musk, or like has that ideology that this guy's a savior and whatever. I struggle, right, to see it. I get it, right, because the way they speak and blah blah blah. But I don't think they fully understand how fast this is going to, like these people are on benefits going, oh, I love that guy Elon Musk, he's great, and it's because they're talking about grooming gangs and
Yeah.
and things that
Yeah.
that they can relate to. That
Yeah.
but
And they hate woke people.
aye,
But this is the thing, innit? Like, if people really sit down and analyse where they're at in terms of their politics and really sort of reverse engineer it, they're going to find at an earlier point that they started off at a much more moderate political position on
Mhm.
things, where they had a mixture of left and right
Aye,
beliefs
definitely.
like the average person does, right? And then through a process of being completely bombarded on social media with this idea, whatever it might be. For some people, it might be, you know, Christmas is cancelled because of the Muslims.
Football team, whatever.
Right,
Aye.
or it
Mhm.
could be, you know, like there's a trans paedophile in your school right now, you know, dressed up as a drag queen reading Snow White and the
Aye.
7 politically correct small people to your kids.
Aye.
And people just get irritated, right? They get irritated by that stuff. And then somebody like Farage pops up and somebody like Tommy Robinson pops up. Their whole politics is based on weaponizing resentment, right? And they're very crafty at doing it.
Mhm.
And so they just come along and go, hey, me and you, we're just ordinary people. We're just normal people. And you've got these elites and they're doing this and they're doing that. And they say things that are entirely uncontroversial. And then this person who's getting a wee bit annoyed is like, I'm like that. I'm like that. Oh, you sound like somebody who speaks their mind.
Aye.
I'm used to all these Starmers and Reeves and Camerons and Osborns, and they all talk like robots, and you just sound like a real person. What else you into?
Aye.
Ah, right, grooming gangs. Aye, that's terrible. You know, what's happened to these kids? What's happened to these lassies? That's disgusting. It is fucking disgusting.
Of course it is, aye.
It is fucking disgusting. Of course it's disgusting. But then it's like, what else are you into? And the more deeper you get into the rabbit hole, then the more you see that at the end of it all, these guys don't actually have a solution to anything. Their whole thing is emphasize the problem, get politically more powerful with the people who want to see some kind of action, any kind of action. But it actually all comes back a lot of the time just to irritation at things changing.
Wild, isn't it?
Irritation at some of the kind of more excessive aspects, identity politics online and all that. But you have to ask yourself, like, I mean, sometimes I see people, right, and they're sharing this meme, and it's a meme of, it's basically like a dad, right? A protective dad reading to his kid in bed, holding up what looks like some kind of Game of Thrones shield,
Aye.
protecting the Wayne for a rainbow, right? LGBT ideology.
Aye.
And I just think evidence shows that the phone you bought your Wayne
Aye.
for their birthday at 9 years old is merely a risk to your child's safety
Aye.
than anything a drag queen could read them in school,
Aye.
right? Come on to fuck.
Aye.
Like, you know, I get that it's a bit annoying and some people are a bit flamboyant, and constantly
Aye.
hearing about how you're privileged when you don't feel privileged can be a bit irritating and you feel unseen. But is that a reason to swallow wholesale far right ideology? I don't think it is. Do you know what I mean?
And I think you're bang on. I see when I try and speak to people, or I'll talk to people and I'll say, look, let's start off at where we are. You working class? I'm working class, right? Are we one wage away? Aye, right. Go. So you build common ground on that, and then but as soon as you start going, what team do you support? Rangers, or yeah, aye. Then your ideology goes that way. Celtic go that way. Palestine, Israel. You're like, it's mad. You're like, are you what is happening to you? Do you know what I mean? So do you know one of the most annoying people? Joey Barton, right? Joey Barton goes on.
This is another guy who's just been done for domestic
know.
violence. I mean, look at it.
I know.
Let's just take a second
I
here,
know.
right? Let's have a look at a list of the guys that have become lightning rods for these
Aye.
issues, and let's look at what's been happening
Aye.
with them, right?
Aye.
And let's look at where they find comfort. What's important to say is, I'm not saying everybody who has a right-wing belief must then also be suspect in
No,
their character.
definitely no.
I'm not
No,
saying that,
definitely.
right? There's a lot of conservative authors that I
Aye.
read, commentators that I follow. I like to remain abreast of what the kind of temperature of conservative opinion is
Definitely.
for the centre to the further along the spectrum. But there is something that does align
Mhm.
when it comes to a certain type of guy with a certain type of history
Mhm.
and the safety that he needs to find around other men
Mhm.
who think that shit's all right.
Aye.
Right?
Mhm.
That's just a fact, right? Conor McGregor invited into the White House,
Mhm.
right? So that Conor McGregor could warn
I know.
Americans about the danger of rapists coming into the country, right? I mean, like, and I don't normally speak on these things,
No, I know, but
but it's just because people don't ask me, and that's fair
Aye.
enough. It's like, at what point are you going to say, "I innocent till proven guilty," but also, how many red flags do you need to see before you go like that? Game's a bogey.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean?
Definitely, and I think that I would just love to see, like, when you argue quite a lot, right, on Twitter and whatever, right, and I'll say, look, we need the working class to come together. These division tactics, whether it be for Labour, whether it be for it's division tactics, and I don't it, stop talking as extreme left and extreme right. Bring it in a bit. Do you know what I mean? Why we don't need to jump to, like, I get it, right? I can get where you're coming from when you're saying all these boats of people are coming in
Yeah.
and there's videos here. And I get it. Like, I get where you're coming from. I get where you're coming from with, like, grooming gangs. Not it's disgusting. Oh, it should. But on the other side, there's always been drag queens. There's always been gay people. There's always why now is it? I'm not listening. And by the way, I'm going to say, because there's certain things that happen in schools I don't agree with.
Aye.
So, but that doesn't mean that we just target a whole
Aye.
community of people.
Aye.
And I think this is what's happening, Dan. We've got pockets of people who are very, very clever at, like you said, who are initiating and weaponizing these things, and people are buying, right, like, it's so much, and it's like, to the extent you can't ever debate with them, it's like, no, like, fucking boats are coming out. I know, but you're like, mate, bring it back a bit. Like, let's talk about what benefits the working class. These cunts are all way out there doing whatever they
Yeah,
want.
but see, if you sit down and actually say, and I do this, and I'm somebody on the left who takes a lot of time in my work
Mhm.
to try and understand and articulate the position that I think is held by a lot of working class people in rundown communities where there's been no economic strategy and where the pressures of immigration are felt quite acutely,
Aye. Mhm.
right? And part of the thing that puts people in a far right pipeline is that simple acknowledgement of that pain or that difficulty or that challenge that we could accommodate easily by just saying, you know what, it's not all bed of roses when you have waves of immigration into
Definitely.
communities where there's no resources. We were so late to the party in terms of just granting that basic observation that we left it to people like Farage and Tommy Robinson, who then smuggled in all their more kind of other agendas and stuff like that. But also, equally so, if you're going to treat people who have that belief as serious, you have to seriously debate with them. And the
Aye.
question I have for people who hold that belief is, why are people coming here? Why are people
Aye.
coming here? What is it about the rest of the world that's no good enough? And why is that? Right? And if you start looking deeper into it, you'll see that there's a lot of people coming here because they've been displaced because of geopolitical instability that's caused historically, I'm not saying all the time,
No,
but
aye.
by Western foreign policy.
It's usually as we cause the wars. Do you know what I mean?
Aye, of course, and I get that there are extremists who are going to use loopholes. I get that there's a lot of young guys getting off of boats and they're coming here for jobs and whatnot, and that these don't necessarily fit the sort of profile a lot of people have in mind when they're thinking of refugees and asylum seekers. Totally understand all of that. But if you look at if you look at history in a kind of longer lens, then you'll see that, you know, migration is a kind of natural part of what happens, and that one day we're going to have to migrate somewhere for some reason. We're
Aye.
just living in a time where we don't have to do that, and so it's more about it's about, you know, having an idea of what a more sensible immigration policy looks like. I don't agree with a lot of stuff you hear on the left either.
No, I'm with you, Dan.
But you need to understand, you know, because there's evidence that some people motivated by an extreme interpretation of a religion have behaved in a certain way. Once you start going down the idea of that, oh, Muslims must be like that, you know, you lose
No,
me
it's
then.
mental.
You lose
I
me
know.
then. And that's really what Tommy Robinson's about. I'm sorry.
Aye.
Like, that is what he's about. He sees Islam
Aye.
Islam, right? That
Aye.
means anybody that's involved
I
in
know.
Islam, anybody that believes in Islam, that he's got a fundamental problem with them, right? And that there's just the politics of that just don't go anywhere good.
No, and I think, listen, I'm pretty sure, I know people that know Tommy Robinson, right? So I'm pretty sure if I met the guy in the pub, he would be brand new. And I've got no, if you take his politics away from it, I'm pretty sure the guy would be all right.
Well, I'm not
Take
saying
us
anything
in. Do you
personal
know what I
about
mean?
him.
No, but
I'm
this
talking
is,
about his beliefs. Do
no,
you know
but
what I mean?
this is, I agree with you, right? But this is where people, I don't, I see what they're doing to him now in the prison. I don't agree with that either. Like, take noise thing, he's not, I don't agree. Like, that's torture what they're doing to him. I don't align with the guy politically,
Yeah.
right? But see, even I wrote a tweet saying like something like, I don't agree, and the people, oh, you fucking far right, and all that. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Because I said I don't agree with what they're doing to him in a prison. I don't agree with that. It's torture, I think. What
And
they're doing.
you're on you're taking it from a human rights point of view.
Aye,
So you're
totally.
saying anybody.
Aye,
So you're saying anybody in there.
Aye, anybody, like what? So he's on. I don't know. Like, he's not getting visits. He's on in solitary confinement. And I know guys who have spent time solitary. It's no good. They don't come out a better person. So I don't agree with that alignment. But people can get very angry with you just because you don't align with them politically. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not saying anything about the guy. I don't know the guy.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is I don't agree with his politics.
Aye.
But this is where people, I don't know, I've not got the answer. And it's like, how do you get these people to just take away and all come together like as a working class? How do we do that, Dan? Because I think we've lost.
You don't need the whole working class. You just need enough.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Aye,
You just
totally.
need enough. You just need enough. And that's if your analysis is that class is a fundamental regimenting factor
I believe
of
it is.
the society, and
Mhm.
that a society has to be pursued along those lines, right? No, everybody sees that.
No, I get
And
that.
just as many working class people would resist that.
Of course.
They resist the idea of being being labelled working class,
Definitely.
or prejudging people's experiences or abilities based on their class position. And so that sometimes is a bit more nuanced. I guess I sort of come for it. I think I kind of come. One of the great things about somebody like Mick Lynch becoming quite prominent for a while.
Mhm.
It was the first time in many years I was able to kind of go put my flag somewhere and go, I think this is kind of where my politics are right now.
Mhm.
It was a guy who was representing working class interests literally as part of his job. So he was in touch with working class people who had signed up to join trade unions.
Aye.
And that's one of the most powerful things you can do as a working class person, right? And he was articulating his sometimes radical viewpoints in a forthright, frank, moderate way. So he was dealing with the elites all the time, right? And he was dealing with working class people all the time. And this moderated his speech, his temperament. He understood how far he could push it and how far he has to pull it back in order to maintain the relationships necessary to having the best negotiation possible and the best outcome for his members, right? Now, that's what happens to anybody who becomes responsible for something, right? See the people who are most extreme in their rhetoric. See the people who are most extreme, whether it's people at home watching the telly or on Twitter, activists, left or right, or, you know, quite prominent figures like Tate or Robinson. Sometimes their extremism and their idealism, whatever that looks like, comes from the fact they've never had to make a decision. They've never had, right, okay, cool, you're in charge of immigration policy.
Aye.
Right, okay, you're going into a negotiation with the European Union. Right, okay, you're responsible for the well-being and livelihoods of millions of people. Go big shot, what do you think? See, a lot of these people that are very, very loud about what they would do with the world if they had a
Make
magic
conclusion.
wand, they would shit their pants at the prospect of it. There's a real comfort in having this idealistic view of the world because it means your theories are never tested, right?
Aye.
And it's a bit like what I was saying earlier with the Trumps and the Musks and the wealthy who don't get challenged. You can just sit and go, aye, but if you done that, it'd be better, and then you just get back to your life, right?
Aye.
Sometimes the people who actually have to make the decisions, whether it is somebody like Mick Lynch or whether it's even somebody further up, one of the burdens they have to carry is that there are actually consequences if they act on their ideologies. So that has a moderating effect. And that's why sometimes people in those positions are not so reckless the way they talk.
Totally.
But a lot of people don't like that. You know what I mean? A lot of people like to see people that are intense and aggressive and idealistic, because it's comforting in it. It's comforting the idea that it's just really simple.
Definitely. I think I'm probably biased, Dan, right? So I know I'm biased to the working class, right? And I'm so I don't see it for the middle class point of view, and I don't see it for the elite class, like. So I need to watch that. I need to be careful of that when I speak, and because I always say, like, and you're totally right. I think we need to maybe even recoin the term working class, because I think we need to bring people together that are kind of, I don't know. I wouldn't even say the breadline, but just to kind of bottom, like, but people that don't want to be called working class now, as if it's like a label that they don't want. I think the middle class and stuff like, they're kind of, I don't know, like, they're in a privileged position at the moment. I think in the way that nothing's affecting them now, like, in the way money's just going to money constantly now, and I don't know, like, yeah, you could. The Israeli politics and stuff like that, I'm really, like, the lobbying and that day is outrageous, and I think it's just going to get worse and worse. And if
Well, you see what happens when anybody speaks out or challenges it, anybody at any level of prominence.
I
I mean,
know.
a guy last week, couple of weeks ago, he won an Oscar. Next week, he's getting fucking battered and
I know.
disappeared. Like, so there's a real cooling effect in my kind of industry, right? Around a lot of these issues where, and the thing is, it's important. You got a lot of people maybe either because they're so wealthy that nobody can touch them, they've got fuck you money, or you've got people who've got nothing to lose. And on both sides there, they have very strong opinions about people whose future and kids' future is not necessarily secure, should be using their platform to say this and that. You know, people who work in education, people who work in universities, academia, people like me, authors and stuff like. Obviously, I have a bit more license and latitude because I've already been introduced as somebody who speaks their mind about things. But I wouldn't be necessarily turning around and saying to other people, why are you no talking out? Because usually it's out of fear, and you're not going to persuade somebody out of fear by being that critical of them. But whether you're talking about kind of Israel-Palestine issue, whether you're talking about, you know, any other issue that's related to identity, any other debate, most people are ducking out of these. Right, they're ducking out of them, and it's not always unwise to duck out of them, because truth be told, this is a spectacle now. The online activism, it's a spectacle, and a lot of us, we don't realise that when we're saying things and doing things, apparently because we care deeply about them, that actually we're operating off of impulses we're not even aware of. We want to be seen to be that kind of person. You know, some of the best people, the most virtuous people, you know them for your community, I know them for mine. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody will ever know who they are. And they do 90% of the good stuff that happens in the schemes. The food banks, the community groups, the fucking all this stuff, the front line stuff that's happening, right? And if you go and talk to them about the trending issues of the day, they'll probably be quite guarded as a matter of necessity.
Or they don't care. Like, it's like they're only interested in their community, and global issues don't really matter to them. If you know what I mean. Like, I know a lot of people like that, actually, that I will speak about Israel. Like, I think they're very dangerous at this moment in time. I think that, and that's only my opinion. I think the way it's going, I think that it's a very dangerous position we're in now with them. I think they've got far too much power for the size of the country, and especially where they're located. And I think they are running a lot of the policy that's coming around it. And I think, like, somebody like Jeremy Corbyn, who was gaslit 5 years ago, 6 years ago for talking about Israel, now you could do that. If that was new, like, he could probably speak about it, because but it's so controversial, if you like. And by the way, actually, I love Gabor Mate, I love Aaron Mate, I love that. I've got nothing against Jewish people. I'm talking about the Israeli government, like Netanyahu, his policies and the stuff that they've got, like lobbying and that. It's very, very dangerous.
It's a brilliant case study on trauma, generational trauma.
Definitely.
I mean, if you
country.
That's the kind of lens that you can look at it through. That's no the one a lot of other people will look at. But what you see is it begins with a wound, right?
Definitely.
And a real victimhood that is completely warranted. The injury being one of the greatest catastrophes in human history, right?
Aye.
In terms of the Holocaust, and the need for a people to find somewhere where they could be safe and secure in the face of thousands of years
Aye.
of persecution, right?
Aye.
So that's the starting point when you're looking at it through the trauma lens. And then from that woundedness and from that sense of persecution, which is no unwarranted, I mean, it's obvious.
I get it.
But what happens is that gets exploited by actors that are outside of all of that. Who say, actually, if you set up shop there, that's a good wee place for us to we can hang back. You're there, we'll back you up. We need somewhere out there that's kind of friendly to us because we know there's a lot of stuff out there that's part of our interest. And the whole thing just develops for there. But central to the idea that really politicians need to get buy-in from Israelis and other people around the world is that any action the Israel government takes is justified as a result of, if they don't take that, the Jewish people in that country face an existential threat, right? And obviously in a lot of cases, as we've seen, because this stuff's being beamed into our fucking houses every day through the internet, that doesn't ring true. Do you know what I mean?
No.
It just doesn't. It just doesn't. But what it shows is that old adage, hurt people, taken to extremes, because when you're consumed by a mindset that is just detecting the threat, then any action is justified. And you need to dehumanize people to make the action that you need to take easier. And so you see the kind of steps of the kind of pendulum of victim perpetrator and how it swings back. And I think in some ways that is mirrored in some of the politics that come from more extreme elements within Palestine or in the Muslim world generally, obviously. But it's the most sophisticated, powerful military in the world. So it's quite hard sometimes to reconcile this idea that there's such deep vulnerability there, when at the same time it's a literal fucking fortress.
No, I know.
You know what I mean? Like, that's what I struggle with.
No, and like that. I mean, I'm not going to go into my politics. My politics is pretty mental, right? And I know it's a bit probably doing that conspiracy road stuff and that, but even taking it right back to like where the kind of Israeli state started, like you've got like the Rothschilds and that are involved, and I'm not saying like
I don't know anything about that. I just know it was created. I know that Israel existed. It was created by the British Empire, right? And then obviously as the British Empire starts winding down and America's involvement in geopolitics increases, then it becomes America's #1 ally. So that's my understanding of it. I don't know anything about the Rothschilds.
No, they were just involved in the agreement of with the British. It was basically them that agreed in 1903 or something. Like it was basically them that agreed that Israel was going to be where it was and give them the space. But when they're involved in anything, I don't trust. But that's only my personal opinion. But
Bankers. What's that?
Bankers. Right, technical.
Cool.
But no, I think I bang on, and I think it's like when you look at I've heard Gabor Mate speaking about it in generational trauma and just saying like how the people of Israel, it doesn't matter how any other stuff and other stuff that goes on about the people of Israel are wounded, and they'll buy into the fact that we will never be hurt like that again. And as you say, they've got the most powerful military, probably the most powerful intelligence agency in the world, and they're operating out of fear.
Yeah.
And it's just because of what happened to them before.
No, of course. I mean? And I mean, I did a keynote speech a couple of years ago, just as the war started. And it was a keynote that was booked in months in advance, probably about a year in advance, right? It was for a big global charity that works in all the conflict zones around the world. Post-military engagement, they remove landmines, they rebuild communities in partnership with, the different factions. It's the stuff that gets sent in when the war's no happening on the news, the real work of reconciliation and rebuilding. And so my thing was to go there and talk about how you shouldn't need to involve communities and decisions that affect them and how that principle applies to the work that they did. And so I was going to do this keynote and I got up to talk, but as a result of the way that the war in Israel, between Israel and Palestine or Hamas or however people want to talk about it, was already showing the amount of kids that were getting affected. And it was showing that it was already eclipsing what was happening in Ukraine in terms of just the sheer civilian casualties. And I just felt I couldn't get away from addressing it in the keynote because the charity that I was doing the keynote for is politically neutral.
Mhm.
It's one of the few charities that's not taken a position,
Aye.
that's not demanded a ceasefire, that's not, used any of the kind of the terminology that you hear, whether it's a genocide or war crimes. They've stayed clear of all of that. And that's stuff I'll regularly do that's not publicly viewable. I mean, this is 2 years after it, and I'm just saying
Aye.
right? So I'm not out there on Twitter every day like that. Like, I'm using my position in my life on a day-to-day basis sometimes to do things in a different kind of way. But you could feel it in the room. I felt it in the room. They were split right down the middle. So even within that organisation, there was disagreement. It's pretty fundamental, the level of disagreement that exists, right?
Of course not, definitely.
But here, the final thing I'll say, take away the trauma lens, take away the history, take away all of it. 2 days before the war, right? 2 days before the attack, the Hamas attack on Israel. Hamas were less popular among Palestinians than they had been in a long time across a number of metrics. And this was official data that was published beforehand, right? Netanyahu facing corruption charges, less popular, plans to oust him. This is a guy who's hung on by a thread by getting in bed with some real ideologues.
No, I know.
Right?
Aye.
I'm not a geopolitical expert, but I would say Netanyahu and Hamas are more popular now than they were before this conflict started, and that military action is a performance-enhancing drug to any politician on the precipice of collapse, and that they've both got what they wanted. They've both got what they wanted in terms of creating a situation where the conflict happens again, and then the idea of either of them not existing is difficult for their respective people who support them to contemplate because it's a time that's just too vulnerable.
Aye.
And so, I'm not both sides in it, and I'm not trying to say that they're perfect mirrors of each other. They're different intentions and histories and all that. But right to the core, these are politicians. These are just politicians playing the cards that they've been dealt. And you really need to sometimes just look at what the actual material outcomes of their actions are rather than what they say. I mean, just last week, Netanyahu broke a ceasefire and started it again. He got out of court to go and do it.
I know.
He got out of court to go and do it. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, when there's so many red flags, you've just got to go, come on, man. Come on. Oh, can't come to the corruption trial today, guys, man. I've got to fucking go and... Fucking come on, man.
It'd be good to have that one done. But no, I see that the sad. I'll just finish up. But see, the sad thing is,
I'm glad you never asked me about any controversial topics today. Anyway, that's good. I've got a book coming out. I want to play it safe.
I'll just finish up. But I think even just like see if it did finish up as a two-state, kind of like see the Palestinians, they're going to have this generational trauma now and all. So it's not going to end. You know what I mean? It's like it's horrible. It's the situation it is. But listen, Darren, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on, and I'd love to have you on again at some point. But thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
All good, my man. Take it easy.
Brilliant.